Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Cindy Benitez, and as you can see, I'll be in charge of this asynchronous workshop. This might be a surprise for some of you guys, but I'm pretty sure this is not a surprise for the majority of the class. As Professor Chavarria mentioned some classes ago, I am the teaching assistant of this subject, which means that I will be sharing responsibilities, well, some responsibilities with the professor, and one of those responsibilities is this workshop. This workshop is intended to help you learn a little bit more about American literature that will go directly related with what you are going to learn with Professor Chavarria in your regular schedule. So this is just going to help you, this is like a plus, something that will help you to fully understand and comprehend what you are learning or studying with him. Now, the asynchronous part, what is that, you may ask? Well, this means that you are only going to have recorded classes with me. You're not going to have live sessions, or at least not, there aren't any live sessions scheduled right now, but we're hoping that this will be an asynchronous workshop. I will be in charge of it. I will be the one teaching some topics to you guys, and you will watch those videos through the platform. So those videos are going to be on the platform. I can't promise how many you're going to have, but the frequency for them right now it's one every 2 weeks. And the way this workshop is going to work is that I will be explaining some chapters with very important information, and depending on depending on the length of the subjects, that's how the videos are going to be divided. So I cannot assure, yes, you're going to have one video each week or something like that. Now, I mentioned chapters, right? So we're going to start with the first one, chapter number 1. Now, here we're going to start from the general terms. Everything's going to be general, just for you to know the fundamentals of some terms in American literature. I'm quite sure that you've seen these terms before. This is going to be a reminder for you of 5th grade Spanish class, but now in English, right? So what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn 4 things: form and genre, types of fiction, fables and folk tales, and myths and legends. What are those? Well, we're going to see that later. So, without further ado, let's start. Literary forms and genres. I am quite sure that you know about this, but maybe not like in an official and very formal way. So let's define some of these terms. This is the introduction for what we're going to keep studying. First, form. Form, in very simple words, is how a piece of writing is constructed and organized. Is it in prose? Is it, are those stanzas? Are those dialogues? The structure. Knowing the structure or identifying the structure of a piece of writing will help you to keep describing the rest of the other terms that we have here. For example, if we move from form, if we already know what is the organization of a piece of writing, we can move to the genre. Genre, yeah, it might sound like a very unusual word, and that is because it's a French word that we just borrowed in the English language, but that means basically it's just a category or a classification of a literary composition. So all the stories that you've read so far and all the stories that you are intended to read have a category where they fit in, and that is a genre. That can be, fairy tales, that can be like detective stories. All those types of things are genres. And then we move on to the meaning. You can see the definition there. Meaning is basically what the story expresses or represents, what the writer or the author was trying to convey to the reader. In that case, it might be you or anyone else. So it's just what expresses. Now that we have those three terms very clear, we can summarize this in three words. Let's remember, form, it's related with the structure. The genre is the specific style or category of a story or of a piece of writing. And the meaning is the writer's message, right? What the writer was trying to tell the person that he knows or the person that could be interested in what they wrote. So now that we know that, we can move to the main form, literary forms. Or instead of saying forms, we can say structures, right? Major literary structures. We have four main literary structures or forms. What are those? Well, we have the nonfiction prose, the fiction prose, poetry, and drama. We're going to see the definition of these ones in a very general way because we're going to keep talking about that later on. This is only the introduction to the workshop. So let's see what it says. The nonfiction prose, as you can see it there, nonfiction, it's literature, non-metrical literature that communicates facts or opinions about reality. They just say what they see or what they think it's observable and loyal to the truth, right? So in this type of form, we can include newspapers, magazines, your grammar books, your algebra books, all those type of things go like fit in this category, in the nonfiction prose, because they're not creating anything. They are just replying or trying to put into a physical way what we already know, or the theory that they are trying to express to you. Now, in the other hand, we have the fiction prose. This prose, it's non-metrical literature with the only difference that its product is from the writer's imagination. So here, maybe the writer lived or knew about something that happened on their, neighborhood or close to their homes, and they took that to create a whole new world about it. New characters, everything is different. Everything comes from their imagination. So that is why they're fiction. And that's the one that we're going to discuss a little bit more today, the fiction prose. And then we have poetry and drama. Poetry uses metrical language with lots of rhythm and rhyme to create word pictures. So here we have metrical, rhythm, rhyme. These three words are going to help us to identify and differentiate between the other literary forms. Here, we can easily identify poems or pieces of writing related that fit into poetry because they have shorter lines. They kind of have like a musical tone in it that you can easily recognize, and they create word pictures. That means that they use a lot of devices to give the reader a whole perspective of what they are trying to describe. So if they are talking about nature, they're going to use onomatopoeia, they're going to use alliteration, many other devices to help the reader feel like they're there. Poetry is about that, about directly expressing what the writer was feeling to the reader, or trying to make the reader feel the same. And then we have drama. Here, drama is a combination of both. Drama combines elements of prose, but it also combines elements of poetry. They put them together into plays that are usually intended, I will say always intended, to be performed on stage. So this type of writings are exclusively created to be performed in front of an audience. That's why maybe if you want to say, I want to read a drama book today, that's not going to be possible, or at least you're not going to feel attracted to it, because it has things that you would be missing if you read it, and it would feel very different if you go and actually watch a play about it. So that is just in general terms. We're going to see that later on, I promise. Now, let's talk about genres. We have also here 4 types of genres. We have non-fictional, as I was mentioning before. We have biographies. We have autobiographies, like Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. It's one. We have fictional genres, and in that one we can put romance stories. We can have fairy tales. We can have many others that are very important and you might know already. Then we have poetry. There we have, poems, sonnets that are epics, other are elegies, odes too. And last but not least, we have drama. Here we can have comedies, we can have tragedies, we can even have a bit of this one and have tragic comedies. So those are the genres that we're going to little by little be talking about. So let's start with the first one, types of fiction. Today we're going to discuss 7 types of fiction. Yeah, that might sound a lot, but it's not, because you are very familiarized with these terms. We have novels, novellas, and short stories. Right now we're going to discuss these 3. They might have a similar name, but they are quite different in some aspects that I will try to tell you, so you already know how to differentiate between novels and novellas, because they sound very similar. So let's start. Short stories are pieces of fiction that has a limited number of words. They have a few characters, and they only have one conflict. So during the story, you're just going to have one thing, you're just going to have one plot, and everything is going to go around that plot and trying to resolve that conflict. Short stories are never not more than 30 pages long. So if it's more than 30 pages, maybe it's a different type of fiction, not short stories. Edgar Allan Poe marked the early stage of the development of the short story in the US. He was like the mainly contributor to this type of fiction. He created a lot of short stories, like The Cask of Amontillado, that's a Spanish word. And then we also have, as an example, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He marked the beginning of the short story, or the boom of the short stories, but actually, short stories became more recognized, or a little bit more well-known after World War II, when they started to publish these stories in the newspapers. So if in that time, if you wanted to look at, read the newspaper, you would have a specific section where you could find short stories. But he marked the beginning, he was the one that opened that path to the next writers. He used to say that short stories should be short enough to be read in 2 or 3 hours. They even made the analogy between an appetizer. It should be just the entry for what you're going to have. It shouldn't be you should not feel overwhelmed about everything that is happening. If you just have some time that you want to do something different, you can look at a short story. That shouldn't take you a lot of time. And that is the difference with novella. A novella is a short novel in prose fiction, longer than a short story, but shorter than a novel. It was first introduced in the 13th. So let's look at that. We have short stories, we have novels. So the in-between of those two are the novellas. They don't belong here, they don't belong here. So let's just create a new category for them. They were first introduced at the beginning of the Renaissance. So they've been there a long time. Some examples of novellas are, for example, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. That's a classic, right? A Christmas classic. I don't know if you've watched the movie, but there's one movie, I guess with Jim Carrey. I think he's he just plays Scrooge, the person that gets visited by three ghosts. So that's the whole story. If you want to read the book, go ahead. If you just want to watch the movie, you can also do it if you're interested in this book. Novellas are also known as long short stories because, yes, they're a bit longer, but they also have their own category. It could sound very contradictory to say long short stories, but yeah, that's the name. Another example of novellas are Breakfast at Tiffany's. I don't know if you've heard about that. There's also a movie about that book, but it's just about a woman who just has a lot of dreams and want to be successful and famous, and she used to have breakfast in front of a Tiffany's shop. So I'm not going to spoil any books here, but that's another example of a novella. Now, let's look at novels. Novels are the opposite of short stories. If you only want to read something in 2-3 hours, go with short stories. But if you want to have a week, 2 weeks, you want to be entertained by a book, you should look for novels. Novels are a relatively long work of narrative fiction. They're normally written in prose, just like the other ones, prose form with different conflict. That's a difference. The other ones have one plot, one conflict, and that's it. Here, we might find different conflicts with subplots on it and major characters. So maybe in the other ones we were talking about 4 characters, and here we can have different stories and different things happening at the same time, but they are close to what the main plot is. But they're still being addressed by the writer. Some examples of these novels are The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, another classic that is, of course, about an old man and his struggle or fight with the sea and a fish that he wants to get to the shore. He is a fisher, so he goes on his boat. He's trying to fish because he has had a lot of bad luck, and he gets a big fish, but then some things happen. There are some problems in there that you might know, or you might find the answer for that if you read the book. So I'm not going to spoil any book. And then we have Fahrenheit 451. This is it's a more contemporary book. It was written by Ray Bradbury, and it's like a post-apocalyptic book where many books are forbidden to read. You cannot read them. So the whole story goes around that point. You're not allowed to read, even if you want to read something, you're not allowed. And if you do it, you're a criminal now, because that is not allowed by the government. That's another example of a novel. So let's remember, short stories, they're not more than 30 pages long. Novellas, they don't fit into the other 2 categories. And novels are a bit longer. You will have to take more time to read them. You have to invest more time to read this type of book or fiction. Now, let's look at other types of fiction. And here we have the other 4. We have fables, we have folk tales, myths, and legends. And I'm sure you're very familiarized with those terms, but let's start with fables. So fables are tales with the only intention of delivering moral lessons. That's the main goal, to deliver a moral lesson. It doesn't matter if you it doesn't matter the context, it doesn't matter how beautiful the place or the setting was. No, You're just trying to deliver a moral lesson for the reader. And another key point of this type of writing is that the characters are always animals with human-like qualities. So they are usually going to do things that they normally don't do, right? Because they're fiction. And those, for example, can be that they talk, they walk, they do things that, you know, animals don't do. One famous writer of this type of books or fiction is the Greek Aesop. Yes, Aesop, that's right, that's the one. Even though I have to mention that it is questionable that he wrote all the fables that are attributed to him. That's not a fact. We don't know about it. But yes, that's being evaluated because we don't know if he wrote all of those fables, but one that we can mention is the Hare and the Tortoise. That's a classic, right? I'm sure you've read it before. So fables, they deliver a moral lesson and they have characters. The characters are animals with human-like qualities. That's going to be very important. Now let's talk about folktales. Folktales are, of course, tales that can have a lesson, but not necessarily have it in it. Like, yeah, if a writer wants to write a folktale, that's cool. You can include a moral lesson there, but that's not like a rule that they have to follow. But the main difference of this type of tales is that the characters are humans. Now here we are talking about humans, not animals. But they have some type of twist. What's that twist? They may have super strength. They might do things that are not normally done by humans because our physical, like our bodies wouldn't allow it. In some examples of these folktales, there are many in the American culture, but one that I would like to mention is the Paul Bunyan folktale. Paul Bunyan is a giant lumberjack and folk hero in American and Canadian folklore. So this is a person that since his birth, their parents saw that he wasn't like the rest of the kids. He was a giant. His job was to chop wood. That's what lumberjack means. And because of his job, he used to go and cut trees all like throughout the US because at that time, according to the story, the whole country was full by trees. So that was his job, and many other men did the same task. The difference with Paul Bunyan is that he was a giant, and one time with his axe, he accidentally created the Grand Canyon, right? That place is attributed to him. Also, because of his like giant feet, every time he was going like to a place, his big feet would left there the print. So when it rained, that transformed into some lakes. And that is how Minnesota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, part of Canada actually have the lakes, and many lakes that are in those places. That's also something that Paul Bunyan did. He also had his own pet that it was as big as he was. So that's one of the most famous folktales in America. But the first Paul Bunyan story was written by the journalist James McGilvray in 1906. He did not invent the story. He did not create it, but he was the one that finally put it into paper. So that's why he is also mentioned there, because he was the one that decided to write it and to publish it. So folktales are tales, but the characters are humans that have some type of superpower or like a different ability that most humans don't have. And now let's look at this part, myths. So myths are stories from every culture that explain natural phenomena. They usually explain the origin of everything, the origin of the world, like the native story that says that the world was in the turtle's back. That's one myth. The creations of humans, the creation of humans, life, death, and life and death, of course. One of the most famous myths are from the Greek civilization. For example, we have the birth of Zeus, and we have Athena and Arachne. There are many more, but I just take these ones for reference. For example, Athena and Arachne. Arachne, that sounds like a similar to a Spanish word. Yeah, this myth is about the creation or how spiders came to the world, how they were created. And it's a pretty interesting story. And here I have the video. You're going to have these presentations. So you have the link in there if you want to watch it. It's a TED, so it's going to be really interesting. But basically, I would say that Athena made a competition with a woman. Athena got jealous, and because of that, something happened. But that's like a very poor summary. You should watch the video to get more details about it. And now let's talk about legends. Legends are non-historical or unverifiable stories handed down by tradition from earlier times, that means people that lived before us, and popularly accepted as historical. So in here, we have that they might have like a bit of truth, but not everything. That bit of truth that we can find in legends has been exaggerated like 1,000 times. So it's not close to what really happened. One example of a legend is Robin Hood. Robin Hood is a clear example because it's somehow based in a real person that existed in the King Richard the Lionheart's reign. So Robin Hood is based on this story that tells that one person did not agree with what King Richard was doing. He was thinking that he should do things differently, and because he didn't agree, he decided to become a rebel with a group of other people. And when they they went to the woods. They were in forests. They used to hide in there in caves. There's actually a cave in England that has the name Robin Hood's Cave. That's actually a touristic place. But the point here is that when they saw people going there, like merchants and people like that, they used to, rob to those people everything that they have, and they would take those things to the poor, like in the village, to help those people, because there was a lot of poverty at that time. And they were doing like their charity with those people, but that's how everything started. So Robin Hood was someone like that, but we are not sure if that person actually existed. We don't know if that was the name that that person used to go by, like maybe not, but that's how legend starts. They are unverifiable. That's something that you have to take into consideration. Now, we have mentioned a bunch of types of fiction. Just to give a little feedback, let's remember, myths talk about creation, life, and death. More existential topics, I might say. And legends are unverifiable stories that might include anything that you can think of. But one important aspect of legends is that, well, basically all of these types of fiction have been handed down orally. So it's not something, oh yeah, I will read the Robin Hood story today. No, they're not in books usually, because they're just that. They're not verifiable, and many editorials are not going to publish those type of things because they actually don't know the author of this type of stories. So to conclude, I am trying to be very concise in what I'm saying. So to conclude, it's important for you to know these types of literary forms, and more specifically, this type of fictional forms, in order to fully understand how the literary movements occurred in specific periods of time when the literature was seen as an art, and when the literature, of course, was at its best moment. Why am I mentioning this? Because this is going to help you to understand better the topics that are going to come next. Maybe that this right now would seem something that you already knew, something that maybe you just needed to have in mind again. But yes, please keep in mind that this is going to help you this is going to facilitate your learning. Let's put it in that way. So yes, we talk about 7 different types of fiction stories, of fictional works. Of course, there will be some time of feedback about this, but thank you so much for watching the video. If you got to till this point, if you have any questions or any suggestions that you wanna, just say, like, just wanna express to me, you can reach me out at that email address. That's my email address. So you can just write in there. If there's any academic matter that I can help you with related with the workshop, I will be checking that out to see if you have any questions or any doubts. And of course, as I was mentioning before, there would be at the end of the presentation some questions that you need to answer in order to know that you watched the video, that you have a clear picture of what I was discussing, of what I was presenting before. So yeah, please do this quiz at the end. There are only 5 questions. I'm sure you're going to do great, but just keep that in mind because that's the part that's going to be graded. So thank you so much for attending the first part of this chapter. I am glad, again, I want to say that I'm glad and emphasize that I'm having the chance to be the teaching assistant of this class. And yeah, you'll see me very often. Thank you so much and have a great day, you guys.